Hello, welcome to the Sports Philanthropy podcast. This is your host, Roy Kessel. Today, we are very excited to have with us a special guest. We have Leigh Steinberg. Leigh is the founder of Steinberg Sports and Entertainment and has long been an NFL agent, one of the top agents in the game, currently representing Patrick Mahomes and many other players in the NFL. And Leigh's got a fantastic track record for working with his players to really make a difference in the community. Probably one of the first agents that focused on that area and help players learn how they can make a true impact. So Leigh, thank you for joining us and welcome to the show.
My pleasure to be with you.
You've been doing this for a long time, and I think most people are pretty familiar with your background and a lot of your accomplishments. But as we back up and look at this, I'm always interested to learn what got you attracted to working in this type of field of sports philanthropy and working to make the community better.
So I was raised, Roy, by a father with two core values. One was treasure relationships, especially family. And the second was to try to make a meaningful difference in the world and help people who couldn't help themselves. So I was hardwired at the dinner table to go out and make a difference. And I grew up in Los Angeles, went to school at Berkeley in the late 60s, and I was student body president when Ronald Reagan was governor, and we were always protesting against the war. So I learned everything I needed to learn about negotiations from Ronald Reagan. But I was a dorm counselor in an undergrad dorm, and they moved the freshman football team in the dorm, and one of the students was Steve Bartkowski, who in 1975, 47 years ago, was the very first pick in the first round of the NFL draft. There really wasn't agency there, but I signed him. We got the biggest contract in rookie history, and we flew into Atlanta. And there were Klieg lights flashing in the sky, like for a movie premiere, and a huge crowd was pressed up against the police line and said, "We interrupt the Johnny Carson show to bring you a special news bulletin." And I was stunned by the intensity and fervor of fans across the country. And I thought that if we had athletes go back and retrace their roots and go to the high school community, and they could set up a scholarship fund at the high school or work with the Boys and Girls Club or a church, they could put roots down and they could be great role models. And then at the professional, at the collegiate level, if they rebonded with the alums. And so we probably had 150 people do high school scholarship funds. We have huge numbers of college repayments or minority scholarships. And then at the pro level, it was to find something in their heart that really they'd like to tackle and to leave legacy and make an impact. So we would go into a pro city and take the leading business figures, political figures, and community leaders and put them on an advisory board. And then find something that the athlete was passionate about and then go ahead and design a program to try to tackle that. So Warwick Dunn, who ran for Tampa Bay and Atlanta, we put together a program called Homes for the Holidays, where he's just put the 175th single mother and their family into the first home they'll ever own by making a down payment and outfitting it. So, and Deshaun Watson, who plays for Houston, lived in one of those houses. So it's, and Warwick had a single mother raise him. So he was sympathetic to that point of view. So it's how many different problems in society can we work on? And I began to see that athletes could message in a profound way and trigger imitative behavior, especially in rebellious adolescents. So Lennox Lewis, because in addition to football, I've done baseball, basketball, boxing, cut a public service announcement, Roy, that said, real men don't hit women. And that could do more to change the behavioral aspects of rebellious adolescence than 1,000 authority figures ever could. because here's this big macho person, and that group may not listen to any authority figures, a teacher, parents, but they sure listen to an athlete. So that was Oscar De La Hoya and Steve Young doing a public service announcement that said, prejudice is foul play. So it's programs, it's messaging, it's making a difference in the world, and it's using their non-athletic skills to stretch and reach who they are, and not simply being self-absorbed, but being part of a larger community.
It's interesting as you say that, because people don't make all of those connections. You talked about Deshaun Watson being in one of the homes that Work Done helped put together. And really one of the frustrating parts for me with sports philanthropy is how little coverage it's gotten over the years, where there's some amazing work that the players are doing in the community. And yet the stories, until very, very recently, weren't told at all. Now they're starting to be told a little bit more, because you have all of the social media platforms and so many more cable channels looking for content and things like that. But you started a long time ago helping the players get in front of the media. So explain to people how you were able to leverage that exposure to get more community connection for the work that they were doing.
Well, again, it's networking, so that right on our charitable board, we have the movers and shakers in that city, including usually the publisher of the newspaper or someone running a television station. And the reason for your feeling is that the definition of news is something aberrational. So dog bites man is not news. Man bites dog is news. So if you have 2,000 NFL players and 99.9% of them wake up safe, sane, sober with their own wife, drive to the ballpark, give peak performance, graciously sign autographs, work in charity and community, that's not news. News is drunk driving and fights in bars and domestic violence. And so you can read the sports section and it looks like the business section of the paper, but even worse, like the crime beat section. And so it's up to us to present other models, so that years ago we did a program with Rolf Benerschke, who was the place kicker for the San Diego Chargers. He cared about endangered species. So we called the program Kicks for Critters, and every time he kicked a field goal, people in the community went out and matched at their own level. So we had posters and pledge cards all throughout the city. So if you walked into a 7-Eleven, poster pledge card, a bank, poster pledge card, fast food, poster pledge card. And we used the newspaper to create a roll meter so people could follow how many field goals he kicked and how much money was going to that cause. And then we got kids to collect cans, so that became Cans for Glitters. So you get an entire community behind this program. And the first year we had Rolf kick a field goal from the flipper of a sea lion. And the second year we had him kick one from the hoof of a baby elephant. So along with trying to work for a cause, you need to make it marketable. You need to make it interesting and colorful and attractive to cut through the massive amount of information that people have. So you got to think of graphics. You have to think of a clever slogan. You have to think of ways to make this brand this community or charitable program, this foundation, to brand it in a way where it gets recognition. And I don't apologize for athletes getting recognition for role modeling, because what they're doing is every human being in this country could do their own program in their own way. And so what they're modeling is that behavior. It's not how to be a professional athlete, because an infinitesimal group will ever do that, but they're modeling community spirit and good values and a sense of family and nurturing family and community, and the fact that we can tackle any problem. So if it's sex trafficking or racism or bad police shootings, or it's climate change, each one of those issues, we can change the atmosphere and trigger imitative behavior. So one of the things we created was something called a Sporting Green Alliance. So you think about the environment. Well, we took stay arena and practice fields and to drop carbon emissions and energy costs, and put in programs that were in recycling, resurfacing, water, solar, and so you could go to a stadium and see a display of that, and that would trigger people to think about how to integrate a waterless urinal or a solar panel in their own lives or businesses. And so you can use sports to trigger change towards climate change. And so it's being, you're trying to be impactful in each of these, and really take a community by storm or a national audience by storm.
So take us through the process when you get a new player and you're trying to help work with them to identify what kind of involvement they're going to have. What does that process look like in terms of helping understand what's important to them? Because I think frequently organizations go about it backwards, right? And they go chase after a player and hope to convince the player that their cause is what the player should support, instead of understanding the player and what's important in his life or her life.
So the most important skill in agenting, and I believe in life, is the quality of the ability to listen and draw out another human being and cut below the surface of surface responses until you really understand their deepest anxieties and fears and their greatest hopes and dreams. And so it's saying to an athlete, suppose you have this one golden opportunity to make a real difference in the world. Is there anything that particularly you'd like to tackle, whether it's a disease or at-risk kids or whatever's in your heart and mind? Let's get to that. And then you'll have real passion towards the program that you do, because you feel. So sometimes it's a disease that a family member has. Sometimes it's the way they grew up and trying to make a difference there. So the first step is to get deep into the soul of the athlete and find out what's really critical to them. And then start to think about how would we do a charitable foundation on this. Now, currently, we did these foundations for years, and then we found that there were problems with them because many times the parents or other people of the athlete were the staff, and they ran afoul of Better Business Bureau suggestions as to what percentage of overall funds raised should go back to the charity itself, right? And so they were involved in some fundraising activities and they knew that. Or they ran afoul of the tax code. So there are a couple sorts of solutions. There's a fellow like Mark Pollock in Giving Back, and he has an Uber agency, and underneath his agency, he does the bookkeeping, helps with the fundraising. So the athlete has their own foundation, but it's under this umbrella that protects them from adverse situations. Then you have someone like Kevin Kaplan, who does coaching charities, and he also does a fabulous job. He's working with Tua Tagovailoa and with Patrick Mahomes, and so and they'll take a percentage of monies raised, so they're only paid when it actually goes out. But putting them under that umbrella of some expertise is really important because we're doing this to spread goodwill into the world and to make a difference. We're not doing it to garner adverse publicity. So I used to help the athletes and sit on a board, and then you tell them we need a board for this 501c3 that will be people close to you so you can execute your programs. And then we set up the advisory board. And then so Mahomes is 15 in the Mahomies, and it's done everything from bring school lunches to kids that are having problems with that in Kansas City to donating, which he did with Deshaun Watson, to first responders who were having problems. But it's all youth-based. So there's two sorts of foundations, as you know. There's one in which you raise money for a specific cause and distribute it yourself. So that's one type. And the other is a pass-through, where so Steve Young raises tons of money for kids, and then he grants money to people already out there working in the community and supports other foundations. Patrick does a lot of that too. So you could either be integrally involved with fundraising and then actually distributing the funds to that cause, or you could be a pass-through and have a general charge and then go out and grant money and have a process. But either way, this is all powerful because athletic visages are brought larger than life into people's homes. And it's really an unnecessary discussion when someone like Charles Barkley says parents should be their role models. And yes, in an ideal world, they should. But in football, the quarterbacks should become the new movie stars of this society. And so if you can get someone making a difference, it's important. And I also encourage them to speak out on if they have strong political views so that they can make a difference. And a number of players did that after some of the unfortunate incidents last summer. And I think they have to know the facts before they talk. I think they have to make them sure that they're well informed. I think they want to be careful in understanding the larger audience that all unites behind pro sports, but then they have a voice, they have a right, and it's part of development of all sorts of other skills that will take them into second career and help them for life.
It's interesting you raised the point of the risks that the players have with their foundation if things aren't operated properly, because over the years we've seen some high profile examples where ultimately, even if there's not misconduct on the player's part, right, when it goes on the ESPN ticker, it's not the person who was working in the foundation whose name is running across the ticker, right? And here in Chicago, we had Chris Zorich, who had some of those situations occur. And I think that model you talked about with Mark Pollock and with Kevin Kaplan, their model helps the player insulate and really focus on where their strength is, which is using their platform, using their publicity and their networking ability to get more exposure, to raise more money. And really, ultimately, that helps make a greater impact. And so you talked about the two different types of foundations, essentially like an operational foundation or a pass-through type of model. What's involved with the players as you go through deciding which way they want to go with that?
So the question is whether they want to adopt a hospital and simply give the money, every bit of the money raised to that hospital. Or would they rather target at-risk kids and give it to a variety of different hospitals or a variety of different inner city causes? So you probe them, and then we have them meet with someone who's an expert in foundations. so that they talk through those concepts. This is a good learning empowerment experience for them because they're learning, this is being set up, but they're going through every step of having to think through how they're going to do this. And we give them advice and we send them to experts, but they've got to be informed. And so it's really the athlete's preference. And it depends what they have the capacity to do. For years, the biggest fundraising event was a golf tournament with a banquet after it. And then those became a little problematic at times because the cost of flying a bunch of players in and the cost of doing the banquet ended up overwhelming the amount of money that actually went to the charity. So some people changed. So Ward Young and Jake Plummer had bowl-a-thons that were lower than that. And you have to be very clever in terms of understanding how to use social media as a fundraiser. And so it requires an expertise in understanding Twitter and Instagram and the multiple platforms of content supply that we can use, and the synergies that might come out of it. And again, it helps I mean, if you remember the dumping the water on your head that took the country by storm.
The Ice Bucket Challenge.
The Ice Bucket Challenge, and which got me very cold down here in front of our office. But the point was that was clever. So you want to use imagination to try to capture the public attention, and think of ways to put a little bit of fun into it too, and then you can use stadia, you can use arenas, you can use one of the auctions. So we always have live auctions and the rest of it. And the live auction depends on how many wealthy people are in the room and how much they've had to drink and how aggressive they get in bidding. But if you can get two people bidding against each other, it really goes well. So the biggest items are the ability to play basketball with Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan. It's the ability to stand on the sideline for a football game. It's the ability to do, oddly enough, people bid money for lunch with me, and which is worth the price of the meal. But the point is, again, if you get two people bidding against each other, you can really raise a lot of money. So there's silent auction, and what I do on that is I go around and I put my name on the bidding for every silent auction item, because you need to stimulate some action and activity. And then when people see my name, they're going to say, oh, I can beat that Steinberg guy. I can outbid him. He got nothing on me. However, there are times when it becomes a little more problematic. I remember at Jake Plummer's bowling tournament, there was a live auction, and it was for a picture of Jake. So I'm bidding against somebody else, hoping like crazy that they outbid me, because otherwise I'm going to take home a warehouse full of stuff. So anyway, Vince Vaughn, the actor, starts bidding on this, and then he sees me across the room and he says, Leigh, I can outbid you. He's your client, but I can outbid you. So I bid $1,000 and he bids $2,000, and I bid $3,000 and he bids $4,000, and I'm like, oh my God, can I get this going? So I bid $5,000 and he bid $6,000, and oh no, will he keep going? And I bid $7,000 and he bids $8,000, and I'm like, so I bid $9,000 and he leaps up and bids $10,000, and I stop. And he says, jumps on the stage and he says, Leigh, I beat you, but the artist is here. Can he create another one? So for $10,000, and Jake is sitting at the table ahead of me. He said, wouldn't you? So anyway, for $10,000, I have this very strange piece of art on Jake Plummer. But the point is, if you're running a auction, either if you're that's the boats below. If you're running an auction, either live or whatever, you have to tune into that market. So here in Chicago, obviously something with the Bears or the Bulls is going to go bigger, and you have to be sensitive to the market you're in. But you can raise a fortune. I once raised $25,000 twice for lunch for Back to Africa Village, but it was because people got into it. And then you can, if you have people at your banquet, you can have them jump up and say, you know, what it's worth. You can prompt the whole thing, and you need to have a good auctioneer.
I think you're right when you talk about the experiences. Those are something that people can't just go somewhere else and buy. If you look now at a lot of the memorabilia, there's so much of it out there. And if you go, the people that play in a lot of golf outings or go to a lot of dinners, right, they're going to see the same jerseys. They're going to see a lot of the same sign type of things. But having the opportunity to have lunch with a player or dinner with a player or with you or play around a golf, that's something that they don't have that same type of access to just pay for and get access to. So it really does help raise money.
Or sit with a broadcaster for one inning, right, and be the guest, or any fun experience that you could think of, or being a ball boy for a game. It's, if you're not in the field of sports or celebrity fundraising, a lot of things seem like a once in a lifetime opportunity.
It's interesting to see how, as you said, how the experiences really raise that. And then you get to that level where somebody at the end says, hey, let's go ahead and take the second place person and have them also buy it. And then you sell two of them at 9,000 instead of one of them at 10,000. And it's a great benefit for the cause.
This is a thing for Kentucky Charity where they had two people bid on me and Bill Walton. And so we're sort of doing it together. The other thing we use is our Super Bowl party. So they're anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000, my closest friends. And until this year was virtual, but generally I've done it 34 years. And so at that party, we've got people from the business, politics, sports, entertainment, loads of players and the rest of it. So one of the things we always do for the troops is we raised money this last year for Warriors Rising. And we do a live hookup between troops in the field in Afghanistan and let them participate in the party over a live setup. We granted wishes for Make-A-Wish. We honored someone for a cause to promote better police relations with inner city. So you can use these. Back in the day when Haiti had a problem with cholera, we raised money and sent the water machine directly from the Super Bowl in Miami to Haiti, and it helped 140,000 people not die of cholera with clean drinking water. So you can use the symbols of sports to try and make a positive impact.
Well, as you said, there's so many great causes, people doing amazing work. There's never ending need to support all of those things and get the athletes trained. Have you seen over the last 20, 25 years that the teams have taken a different approach in terms of how they try and work with the players to make an impact in the community?
Yes, I think they work together on certain projects. Every franchise in sports has their key charity, and so they can use the players to help that. And And they also have community relations departments where they have trained professionals who do outreach to the community, and players who get close to those people end up doing all sorts of visits and to hospitals and visits to an inner city school and visits to all sorts of people. So that usually is the community relations person at the franchise.
So as you look ahead here now over the next few years, a lot of things have changed with social media. There's a lot more player movement. So somebody getting set up to make an impact just in their own community is different now. You see people moving with free agency. You see someone like J.J. Watt that had a huge impact in Houston now going to be in Arizona. What do you think is going to be the key way for athletes to make an impact as they move forward now over the next few years?
Well, you just take the charity with you to the new city. So when Warren Moon had Crescent Moon Foundation that sent kids to college in Houston, and when he went to Minnesota, he took Crescent Moon with him, and it stayed in Houston, but it went to Minnesota with him. And then when he went to Seattle, it went there too. So the point is, you can take most causes are fairly ubiquitous in terms of geography. There are geographical differences, but you can take that same passion and just go straight to the new community. So J.J. Watt, who was fabulous during the hurricane in Houston, already has a reputation for being very active in trying to help off the field. And so the coverage of the fact he's moving makes him a star in that new area, because every time a player switches teams, it's news and all the rest of it. And yet, but free agency operates differently in different sports. So yes, there's a lot of movement in the NBA, less movement for big superstars in football. So even though we're seeing some quarterback discussion today, by and large, if a player finds a good home, they'd like to stay in it, because if a quarterback is there, they've got rhythm with their wide receivers, they've got symmetry with their coaches, they don't want to be jumping around. So football has B+ players make A+ contracts because they're the only ones available, because teams will preemptively sign players. So, and the high school community never goes away. It's there forever. And the college community never goes away. So you have those ongoing relationships.
Well, Leigh, you've done an amazing job getting your athletes involved in the community. I wish more agents were as proactive at getting that done. It would make a big difference to those players for the rest of their lives, not only to the communities that they're playing in. So I want to congratulate you for doing that. Before we let you go, though, I want to take a minute and put you on the spot here. We're going to use our sports philanthropy superpowers and wave our magic wand, and we're going to appoint you as commissioner of one of the sports. So tell us what sport you would choose.
I'll take the most popular one. I'll take the NFL.
Okay, so you're going to kick Roger out of his office, and now you're going to take over.
Go on. Have a good
So what's your first action as commissioner?
I get rid of instant replay, which I think is an abomination. So you got this exciting play where the runner's running and everything's happening, and then guess what? You go to determination whether you really scored a touchdown. So all your excitement and everything goes out the window. You destroy the momentum. You have those ever-gripping visuals of the referee with his head in a deal. Nothing's happening in the stadium. Nothing's happening at home. We have always had referees make calls. They make bad calls, but they get evened out. And we don't need to interrupt. These games are long enough. We don't need to interrupt them as if this was exactitude, because it's still a human being looking at the film. It's not, this is not trigonometry or physics, right? There are no immutable rules. It's still people looking at it, and some things are reviewable and some not. Speed it up. Fans love complaining about calls, and it's gone.
It's interesting because you talk about some of the replay and some of the inconsistencies there. You talk about measuring for first downs where that ball is placed and where the markers are placed, and then you're going to come down and measure where, Gene Steratore needs to take the little index card and put that between the chain and the ball to see if somebody got a first down. So it's really crazy the level that they got. But I think for me as a fan watching the games, it's shown you how incredibly well the officials do on a regular basis. Sure, they miss calls. And personally, I like replay because I'd rather get the call right. I think the mistake right now is they need to really limit the time frame, because it needs, if it's clear, you're going to see it within 30 seconds. If you have to sit there for 3, 4, 5 minutes to try to figure it out, that means it wasn't clear, and you need to just stay with what the call was on the field. That's my complaint.
The problem is what's happening at home is you're watching commercial. What's happening in the stadia is nothing. And so dead time, especially with millennials, is a killer, right? So the whole goal is to keep the action moving in a game that might have 28 minutes of action spread over 3 hours and 15 minutes. It's already slow enough, and you need to speed it up. So you can watch replay, and I'll watch, and as commissioner, I will tell you, in your next lifetime, we'll do replay.
Well, Leigh, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Oh, and we've got our Sports Philanthropy Conference coming, and it's on the 19th. And so I was part of a wonderful program that Roy does that united people of good faith all around the world, as a matter of fact. And so thank you so much for what you do. But if you go to steinbergsports.com, you can tune into the our conference, which will have great speakers. Richard Labschick is the keynoter, and I believe that people who are out doing charity are doing God's work, and I'm always honored to be around a fellow person with that vision. So thank you for having me.
Well, and just to reemphasize, as Leigh said, March 19th is his Sports Philanthropy Conference. We'll have the link up on the site with this page and the podcast, so you'll be able to see all the details and click through and find out all the information right there and see the panelists. He's got a great lineup set up. And again, our Sports Philanthropy World Conference will be June 28th and 29th this year, 2021. We had a great event last year. Leigh was one of our keynote speakers, and we really appreciate him taking the time to join us. We want to thank everybody that joined us today. We appreciate your time. This is your host, Roy Kessel, signing off for the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. Don't forget to live generously.